Hello, everyone. My name is Ravi Sharma, and I'm the National Chapter Representative and Board Member of PanIIT USA. On behalf of PanIIT USA, it is my proud privilege to welcome you all to this forum. This is the first of several talks in the AI Frontier series that PanIIT USA is organizing. And we are honored to have Professor Milind Tambe of Harvard University with us today. Today's talk will be followed by a Q&A session. Please feel free to post your questions, and Professor Tambe will try to address as many of those as possible during the time that we have today. And now I'm honored to introduce Professor Milind Tambe to you. Professor Milind Tambe is a graduate and a distinguished alumnus of the prestigious BITS Pilani, the Birla Institute of Technology and Science in India, after which he obtained his PhD from Carnegie Mellon. Professor Tambe is a distinguished figure in the field of artificial intelligence. He holds the Gordon McKay Professorship in Computer Science at Harvard. He also directs the Center for Research on Computation and Society at Harvard University. In addition, Professor Tambe serves as Principal Scientist and Director of AI for Social Good at Google Research. Professor Milind Tambe is also the author of Security and Game Theory, a book published by Cambridge. Professor Tambe's profound contributions to AI have been recognized with numerous awards. These include the AAAI Award for Artificial Intelligence for the Benefit of Humanity, the AAAI Feinbaum Prize, as well as the IJCAI John McCarthy Award. He has also received the AAAI Robert Engelmore Memorial Lecture Award, the ACM Autonomous Agents Research Award, the Informs Wagner Prize for Excellence in Operations Research Practice, and the Morse Rist Prize for Outstanding National Security Operations Research. Professor Tambe is a fellow of both the AAAI and the ACM. Professor Tambe's work focuses on advancing AI and multi-agent systems for public health, conservation, and public safety. He has a track record of building pioneering AI systems for social impact. His research focuses on fundamental problems in computational game theory, machine learning, automated planning, intelligent systems, and multi-agent interactions. This work has had profound impact on public safety, earning him the Columbus Fellowship Foundation Homeland Security Award, along with commendations from the US Coast Guard, the Federal Air Marshal Service, and the Airport Police in Los Angeles. By the way, all this work is credited with more than $100 million in savings to the US agencies. Today, Professor Tambe is going to talk about how AI is and can be leveraged for social impact, especially for tackling global challenges. He will focus on public health innovations, conservation through AI, and touch upon AI for public health and safety and security. There will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions after the talk, so please feel free to post those questions in the Q&A section. Thank you again for your interest. Please join me in welcoming Professor Milind Tambe. Professor Tambe, thank you for being with us today. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. Let me now share my screen and my slides. Hope you are able to see everything.
Yes, you can see.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining, and I'm really delighted to be able to share my work with you. So over around 20 years ago, my research direction shifted to using AI for social impact. We have been focused on topics of public health and global health, conservation and public safety and security, with the key challenge of how to optimize our limited intervention resources. And one big lesson we've learned is that social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. To give you a flavor of some of our previous work, with respect to public health, we have large populations to serve, but limited number of public health resources. Concrete example is work we have done with youth experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. Harnessing the social networks of these youth, we are able to show that our algorithms for choosing influencers are far more effective in spreading HIV information and reducing HIV risk behaviors compared to traditional approaches. With respect to conservation, we have large conservation areas to protect, limited number of ranger resources. Concrete example is work we've done in Uganda and Cambodia, where harnessing past poaching data, we are able to predict where poachers set traps or snares. And for the past several years, have been able to remove thousands of these snares. This work requires innovation in what we call green security games, which combines machine learning and game theory. And with respect to public safety and security, we've contributed new algorithms to US agencies, such as the Federal Air Marshals, the US Coast Guard, and others. And that's how I got into this area of AI for social impact. Ravi suggested that I weave into this presentation a little bit of my own story. So let me tell you how I got into AI for social impact, and that may also get into public safety and security. So my journey into AI for social good, I got my PhD in computer science at Carnegie Mellon, and by August of 2001, I had climbed the academic ladder at University of Southern California and was associate professor with tenure, happily doing my academic work, theoretical work in AI. And then 9/11 happened. People who were in this country at that time probably remember minute by minute what was happening in that terrible morning. And afterwards, you may remember that there were bombings all over the world that followed. And for those of us who are Mumbaikars, you may remember there were continuous attacks on Mumbai throughout that decade. For example, 11 July 2006, bombs went off on this local train in Mumbai. My mother was on the train. Luckily, she escaped unhurt. But these kinds of continuous incidents led me to question my academic work and how it was really being relevant to society. And I was looking for an opportunity in some way that I could move my research to direct impact on society. And the opportunity came in 2007 when Errol Suthers, the chief of airport police, raised the question of how to improve security at the Los Angeles airport, where there were continuous bomb threats. Errol was particularly concerned about somebody ramming a suicide truck into one of the terminals at the airport, like what had happened on June 30 of 2007. The challenge is that there are 8 inbound roads into the airport, but not enough officers to have checkpoints on all roads at all times. There's 8 terminals, not enough canine officers to patrol all airports at all terminals at all times. Where and when do we set up checkpoints? Where and when do we do canine patrols? That's the question Errol posed to me. And now I could see my work in game theory being applicable here. And just to give you a flavor for what this might be in a simplified form, let's assume that there's some simple airport with just 2 terminals and 1 police unit. The airport police can be either in Terminal 1 or Terminal 2, and we have an adversary who's trying to attack one of the terminals who could also attack Terminal 1 or 2. That gives us this 2x2 matrix. The numbers here are reward to the police. And here, a negative reward means number of lives will be lost. So for example, if the police say we are going to always protect Terminal 2 because they just have 1 unit in this simple example, an adversary conducting surveillance will attack Terminal 1. The police are protecting Terminal 2, the adversary gets through, and as a result, lives are lost, the police get a negative reward. If as a result, the police switch and they say we will always protect Terminal 1 and adversary conducting surveillance will attack Terminal 2, again, the police get a negative reward. So any deterministic strategy the adversary could defeat. If the police could use a randomized strategy, 60% of the time they're at Terminal 2, 40% of the time they're at Terminal 1, an adversary conducting surveillance would only know that the police are at Terminal 2 60% of the time, Terminal 1 40% of the time. But what they will do tomorrow remains unpredictable. So what we are doing here is optimizing the limited security resources of where to place them. We are not guaranteeing 100% security. We are only increasing the cost and uncertainty to attackers when coming up with a plan of attack. Because now with this uncertainty in the adversary's mind, there is a chance that the adversary may attack Terminal 1 when the police are actually at Terminal 1. So with this game theoretic model in mind, we actually built a system called Armor at the LAX airport. There's a game model which is more complicated. There's 8 terminals and lots of police units. And we solved the game to generate a probability distribution over different terminals of where the police can be. And so for probability that the K9 patrols will be at 8 a.m. at terminals 2, 5, and 6 is 0.17. Probability that the K9 patrols are at terminals 3, 5, and 7 is 0.33, and so on. And from this distribution, we can generate an actual schedule for the police. So for example, at 8 a.m. on July 28th, in Terminal 2, there should be Team 1, Terminal 5, Team 3, Terminal 6, Team 5, and so forth. So we gave these schedules to the police, and day after day after day, police would take these schedules and execute them. And so this is how Armor started working at the airport since 2007. And it went on to work like that for 10 years. And this is the first application of computational game theory for actual operational security. There's a lot of news coverage. And continuously police would find things going into the airport. For example, in January of 2009, all these weapons were captured going into the airport. This obviously made the police satisfied with the work that Armor was doing for them. And Errol Southers, who had started this work, went to Congress to discuss our work.
LAX is safer today than it was.
Just give me 1 second.
LAX is safer today than it was 18 months ago. A team of research led by Dr. Milind Tambe worked with our department to develop Armor. This software randomizes our vehicle checkpoints along airport access roads and the deployment of our explosives detection K9 teams throughout the airport.
Then we built a system for the Federal Air Marshal Service to assign air marshals to flights. So if you've been on a US air carrier, United, Delta, American, etc., whether there was an air marshal or not on your flight may have been our game theory software. We generated then software called Protect for the US Coast Guard to generate patrols in ports like Boston and Los Angeles and New York. And in each case, these agencies went to United States Congress to give testimony that our work had actually improved national security. There was a paper written that talked about how these systems had done $100 million savings to the US government. But essentially, all of this convinced me that we could directly use AI, take it out of the lab, and apply them to problems that were important for society. Just as a separate point here, for again, Mumbaikars in particular, you may remember 26/11, Mumbai was attacked. And in response, police started setting up these randomized checkpoints along different roads in Mumbai. And our question was, could we improve that? And we came up with an algorithm to do that. I was invited to present this work at the Indian National Police Academy in front of many IPS police officers. That was a great honor. And in front row was Vishwas Nangre Patil, who was one of the heroes of 26/11. He thought this work was great, except I found out that it is really not easy to work directly with security agencies in India. Nonetheless, the lesson remained that not easy to work with these security agencies because just the restrictions of me being in the US and them being in India. But what I was convinced by was the fact that AI can be used for social good, and there are other applications that we were able to work with in India. And that's the majority of the presentation I'll have today, which is work that we've been recently doing for the past 3-4 years on maternal and child health with the world's 2 largest mobile health programs. M-Mitra, which is Mumbai-based, which has 200,000 mothers registered at a time, and Kilkari, which is an all-India program where 3 million mothers are registered at a time. I will also talk about our work on HIV prevention in Los Angeles and also wildlife conservation work in Cambodia, Uganda, and Belize. So let's start with the MMITRA program for maternal and child care. The motivation here is a maternal health crisis that we face around the world today. The UN Sustainable Development Goals says that the maternal mortality ratio, mothers dying during childbirth, should be below 70 per 100,000 live births. So the dashed line is the UN target. Western Europe, the numbers are very low. United States, the numbers continue to grow, but still below the UN target. But if you look worldwide, the numbers are more than double the UN target today. And if you look at what's happening in India, the numbers are decreasing, but still higher than the UN target. So what can we do? We have been very fortunate to be working with Arman, a maternal and child health organization in India, a nonprofit, which is active in 20 states in India, works with 41 million mothers. We've been inspired by the founder of Arman, Dr. Aparna Hegde, who points out that pregnancy is not a disease, childhood is not an ailment, dying due to a natural life event is not acceptable. I met Dr. Hegde in Mumbai in the summer of 2019 and decided to orient our lab towards assisting their organization in the important work that they do in India for maternal and child health. In consultation with Arman, the first topic we focused on was their MMITRA mobile health program. This is a program for new and expecting mothers. It's a weekly 2-minute automated health message that goes out to these mothers from the time the mother is pregnant and she registers in the program to the time the baby is 1 year old. 141 health messages go out to these mothers. The programs are of the messages are of this type. For you and your baby to be strong, you need lots of iron, and it goes on and discusses more things. This is a small snippet of one of these 2-minute messages. Over 2 million mothers have benefited from MMITRA so far. Arman has shown in randomized control trials that mothers who listen to these 141 automated voice messages benefit significantly compared to mothers who don't, in terms of 30% increase in infants with triple birth weights at the end of the year, for example, and other benefits to themselves and to babies. So this is a program Arman has, it works. So where do we come in? Unfortunately, 30 to 40% of the beneficiary mothers who register in Arman's MMITRA program may become low listeners. They may drop out of the program. Now, 95% of the families who are registered in this program have incomes below the international poverty line. So there's a lot of pressures on these mothers. So what can we do? Arman has this call center from where they can give service calls. These are live calls, not automated calls, from these health workers to mothers to persuade them to not drop out of the program. But the call center is small and the number of beneficiaries very, very large. So for example, we may have 200,000 mothers who are registered in their MMITRA program. Automated health messages go out to each and every one of these mothers every week. However, we can only call 1,000 mothers via live service calls to persuade them to not drop out of the program. And the question is which 1,000 mothers to call so as to maximize the total number of health messages that are listened to. So here's a particular health worker, just for an illustrative example. She has 5 mothers under her care. 4 shown in red have not listened to a health message. 1 shown in green has. Now the health worker in this simple example can only call 2 mothers. Supposing she calls the first 2 who have not listened, shown in red, this turns out to be a good choice. These 2 turn to green. There was another mother who was not listening, who also turns to green, starts listening to the automated voice messages. So this was a good choice. Now again, next week, who do I do a live service call to in order to keep them listening to these automated health messages? Supposing she calls the last 2 here. This unfortunately turns out to be a bad choice because these 2 who are red remain red, they stop, they don't listen. And those who are red, who were green earlier also become red. They have stopped listening. So the point is that choosing these 1,000 beneficiaries out of 200,000 is not easy. A live service call may not change a beneficiary state, and beneficiaries may start changing state on their own. So how do we solve this problem? We model this problem as what's called a restless band. bandit to prioritize K of n individual mothers per week. These are called arms of the bandit. So in this particular case, we have modeled each mother via a Markov decision problem, model their behaviors as a Markov decision problem. So the mother might be in a bad state, she has not listened to a health message, or a good state, she has listened to a health message this week. We can take an action to intervene by giving a service call to the mother, or no action at all. And now we have transition probabilities that indicate how the mother's behavior may change based on whether we give her a service call or not. For example, if the mother was in a bad state and we gave her a service call, the probability of going to a good state is 0.8. But if we don't give her a service call, the probability is only 0.2. Now, this is one mother that we have modeled via this Markov decision process. If you imagine there's 200,000 mothers, then there's 200,000 of these Markov decision problems, and we have to choose 1,000 out of 200,000. So that's 200,000, choose 1,000. This is a very large number. So it's difficult to compute which are the top 1,000. This is usually done by computing what's called a Whittle index. Essentially, informally, it's computing the benefit of the intervention. What would be the overall benefit to us if we intervene on this mother? And there's a way, this is essentially a way of ranking all of the 200,000 mothers so that we can pick the top 1,000. So that's what we did here, compute the Whittle index. Now, one other thing is we do not know the actual transition probabilities, the behaviors of these mothers. And this is where machine learning comes in, because now we can use the features of the mother. That is, we have demographic information about each mother, their age, income, education level, etc. And we have engagement sequence. In the past, a mother with a certain age, income, and education level, she was in a bad state, we gave her a service call, she remained in a bad state, service call, good state, etc. So from this past data, we can learn a mapping from the mother's features to transition probabilities. For example, here we have a mother who may be age 26, income 5,000, education is 8th grade, and we learned that her transition probability is 0.3. So from this past data, we can do learning to figure out if a new mother walks in with certain features, what her transition probability might be. And from now, we can then do this optimization to choose the top K mothers, the top 1,000 mothers to call. And now it's time to test this system in the field. So this is a two-stage approach where we first maximize learning accuracy to learn the behaviors of the mothers as accurately as possible. And then we optimize by choosing the top 1,000 mothers. And to evaluate this system, we ran a study with 23,000 mothers in Mumbai. And this is the first large-scale application of these restless bandits for public health. The mothers were divided into three groups, 7,667 each. One was in the restless bandit, I'll call it RMAB. One group was round robin group, and one was the current standard of care group. Remember, each mother, each week got an automated health message, no matter which group she was part of. What changed was who got a service call. We pulled 225 arms per week for 7 weeks. That is, we called 225 of these mothers via live service calls per week for 7 weeks. And now we want to know how many health messages are listened to over the current standard of care in each of the groups. In the restless bandit group, which is our AI group, the mothers were given service calls using our Whittle index algorithm. In the round robin group, the mothers were called first to 25, then the next to 25, etc. In the current standard of care, no call went out because that is the current standard of care. And so if we look at now, what is the impact of these techniques to do service calls? Along the x-axis here are the different weeks. On the y-axis, cumulatively, how many more health messages are listened to compared to the current standard of care where no service calls were now. If you look at the round robin, which is a very straightforward approach of calling the first to 25, then the next to 25, etc., we can see that this orange bar, there's hardly any improvement over the current standard of care. The restless bandit group, 600 more health messages are listened to by these mothers compared to the current standard of care. The point is that it is important to optimize these service calls. If you just call people in a round robin or random fashion, there's not going to be any improvement in their behaviors. We show that the restless bandit cuts drop-off rates by 32% over the current standard of care. So this was already an improvement, but we realized that we can actually further improve upon this approach. So I mentioned to you that what we have is this two-stage approach. We first maximize learning accuracy, try to learn the behaviors of the mothers on average as accurately as possible, and then we choose the top 1,000. However, maximizing learning accuracy on average doesn't lead to selecting the 1,000 best Whittle indices, because it is not trying to target the 1,000 best Whittle index mothers. So decision-focused learning allows us to focus machine learning accuracy to pick the top 1,000 arms, top 1,000 mothers. I'm not going to have time to go into details of this decision-focused learning, but to tell you that we then ran a second experiment with 9,000 mothers. They were divided into 3 groups. One was decision-focused learning, one was the two-stage, the previous learning approach, and the third was current standard of care. And again, we now see, if you look at predictive accuracy, on average, the previous machine learning approach had a higher predictive accuracy. But if you look at the actual listening behavior, we find that decision-focused learning, shown in blue here with weeks on the x-axis, and again, amount of listening over the current standard of care on the y-axis, decision-focused learning led to higher amount of listening. Main point is that we had a previous machine learning approach and we are able to improve upon it. This decision-focused learning approach is now deployed with Arman. The system is called Saheli. It also means obviously friend in Hindi, but it's also an acronym. It's been in continuous use since 2022. It has served over 330,000 mothers. What does that mean? It means we have prevented 30% of drop-offs compared to current standard of care since April 2022. And for bottom 25 percentile of listeners, mothers who are listening very little, content exposure has more than doubled. That means they're getting more information about taking iron and calcium supplements and vaccination and so on. Neha Madiwala, who's the research director at Arman, points out that the AI model has been very effective in identifying women experiencing exceptional difficulties during pregnancy, such as miscarriages, and prioritizing them for service calls. This has improved satisfaction among the call center workers because they can now direct mothers who are facing difficulties to counseling services. We have done a follow-on health studies to show that higher listenership has improved health behaviors. We did a survey of questions like, what are you doing or eating for your health after delivery? And we found that they're doing better if they have listened more. Dr. Hegde is happy with this work, saying we are able to reach out to more and more women each week and get them back into the fold and save lives because of AI. If you're interested, please look at this YouTube video of AI for Social Good in partnership with Arman. I'm going to play one video of one of the beneficiaries who was interviewed in the same YouTube video.
मी तो फोन नव्हते ऐकत पहिला त्याच्यानंतर मला त्या ताईंचा कॉल आला त्या घरी आल्या मला समजवलं हा कॉल घ्यायला पाहिजे तुझ्या पोरांसाठी चांगला आहे हा मग तेव्हा मी कॉल घ्यायला लागले आणि ते कॉल ऐकून खूप बरं वाटतं की कोणीतरी घरचंच मला कोणीतरी समजवायला येतंय मग जसं ते कॉल ऐकते मी तसंच मी माझ्या पोरीचं संगोपन करते.
So it is deeply satisfying that the research we are doing here at Harvard is benefiting someone, some mother in Mumbai as a Marathi speaker. Of course, extra little satisfaction that this is a Marathi speaking mother who also feels like she's benefited from our research. I'm going to just very quickly point out and run through these slides a little bit faster here. I'm looking at time. Tuberculosis prevention, people who suffer from TB have to take pills for 6 months. Again, they may drop off of treatment, and we may again use service call center to remind people to take their TB medicine. And this process is very similar to what I just discussed. And therefore, we can use these restless bandits to get people to adhere to taking their medicine for tuberculosis prevention. Diabetes is another disease, affects 540 million people worldwide. Again, there are logs. These are digital adherence programs now to log exercises, meals, blood sugar, and people are supposed to do this regularly, but they drop off. They may not register all of this information. And now the question becomes, who should health coaches call or text? Again, a challenge that Restless Bandits, the model I discussed, can be applied to. And this leads to, and we've now approached here this challenge by using equitable restless bandits to prevent disparities between different racial groups, for example, in the United States. So far, I've talked to you about creating these AI models, these restless bandit models, one for TB, one for diabetes, one for maternal and child health, all separate. We create these. If anything has to be changed, we have to go and change them. Instead, can we give these NGOs a pre-trained instructable restless bandit model so that they can themselves get the model to change prioritization or do a variety of tasks? And to that end, we've been exploring the use of large language models. So if Arman wants to say, hey, give more attention to beneficiaries who likely work early in the morning and late at night, even though there's no such information directly available in the data set, the LLM can infer from other features who these mothers might be, and then prioritize better the 1,000 mothers so that more attention is indeed given to beneficiaries who may have early and late work. And we've shown that compared to a human doing the same task, the LLM-based work leads to similar performance. So this is promising in terms of being able to deliver to our nonprofit partners these models so that we don't have to have AI experts involved in all of this work all the time. I just wanted to quickly tell you, we've been also trying to work with India's Ministry of Health and Welfare in this Kilkari program. Arman is actually in charge of now scaling up Kilkari. Kilkari is a Government of India program which has reached 30 million mothers. 3 million mothers are actively involved in Kilkari, similar to M-Mitra, sending audio automated health messages. Our focus again with Arman is to prevent beneficiary drop-off. There are some challenges here to use time series to predict next stage because there's no demographic information. We are expecting to work with Arman to do field tests with Kilkari in the future. We've also worked with nonprofits like Help Mom in Nigeria to improve vaccination rates. And they have taken our theoretical model and deployed it in Nigeria and shown improvement in vaccination rates. So let me now quickly turn to a couple of other applications of AI for social impact. The first one is HIV prevention work that we did in Los Angeles. 6,000 youth sleep on the streets of Los Angeles every night. These are youth experiencing homelessness where HIV rates are 10 times the rates of the normal house population. We want to prevent HIV. Homeless shelters want to do this work. Unfortunately, you can't reach all of the 6,000 youth. So what homeless shelters do is to call peer leaders, influencers, educate them about HIV prevention, expect them to talk to their friends and their friends to talk to their friends and information to spread on a social network. This is real face-to-face interaction. This is not happening online. So just to give you an illustration of what we are doing, each number here is a homeless youth, each edge is a friendship edge, and we have to choose influencers within this community such that we spread information about HIV. This is a picture from one of our sessions, education sessions, where our social work colleague was educating these youth in Los Angeles. Information is modeled as spreading using this independent cascade model. If we educate youth C about HIV prevention, they'll educate youth D with a probability of 0.4. And if youth D is informed, then they'll inform their friend E with a probability of 0.4. Now, in computer science, there's 20 years of work in doing these kinds of choosing influencers. So the problem we faced in taking that work to the field in Los Angeles was that the social networks of these youth are not known in advance. So the question for us is, can we sample a small fraction of this network and choose influencers such that we maximize influence spread? And we did exactly this task. And then the system that we built was called Change. It did network sampling and then chose peer leaders. We did a study with 750 youth with Professor Eric Rice at the School of Social Work in LA at University of Southern California. 3 arms in the study. One was change. 250 youth influencers were selected using change, our AI algorithm. Degree centrality, 250 youth were selected in the degree centrality is traditional approach, choose the most popular youth, and 250 in the control group, no influencers at all. And we want to know now at the end of 1 month and at the end of 3 months, what is the actual reduction in HIV risk behaviors. And what we find, this is work done with 3 homeless shelters in LA. If you look at reduction in condomless anal sex, which is one of the HIV risk behaviors, we changed, there's more than 30% reduction in this HIV risk behavior at the end of 1 month, but with degree centrality and control, the other 2 comparisons, there's hardly any change. There's hardly any improvement. At the end of 3 months, degree centrality, the traditional approach begins to improve, but change is still superior. The point here is that the method we have introduced for selecting influencers to reduce HIV risk behaviors works faster. And because this is an HIV risk behavior, having things move faster is important. We also looked at reduction in condomless vaginal sex, and again, we can see that change leads to improvements. This is what our collaborator had to say about this work.
Beautiful way to kind of like marry this tech world with this social service world, like, and how we can kind of go deeper and impact young people and elevate them.
The third point I wanted to very quickly discuss was wildlife conservation. So maybe last 3-4 minutes. There are national parks around the globe, like this Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda, which is wonderful wildlife. Unfortunately, there are threats to the wildlife, snares or traps that are placed by the thousands to maim and kill this wildlife. Rangers patrol these parks, 200 rangers patrolling thousands of square kilometers in Uganda, for example, trying to find these traps and remove them. You can see how difficult this task is. So can we assist them? To that end, we built a system called PAWS. It divides up this national park into 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid square. And then with machine learning based on past poaching data, can we predict where poachers may set traps? And then with game theory, give them randomized patrols, just like we did earlier with the LAX airport and the Coast Guard and so on. So we have past data from Uganda for ranger patrol frequency in each grid square, animal density, distance to rivers, roads, and villages. And we are trying to predict the probability of finding a snare, a trap per 1 kilometer grid square. So in early work, we just tested our machine learning approach. And so the first test was done in Uganda in the fall of 2016. They wanted us to choose 2 9 square kilometer areas, which we did, which were infrequently patrolled. So basically, we don't want to say to rangers, hey, you patrolled these areas in the past, you found snares, go there, you'll find snares. No, we want to tell them about new areas that they haven't patrolled, because this is how we can show them the machine learning can be useful. So we selected 2 of these areas shown in green dots, which were infrequently patrolled. The red dots are all the places where rangers had more frequently patrolled. And we said, if you go there and if you just go there and patrol, you will find new snares. So rangers went there, they would patrol, and every day they would send us an email as to whether there was a snare found or not. And for a while, nothing was found. Then it turned out they found a poached elephant with its tusks cut off. So our machine learning system was pointing them in the right direction, except we were too late to help this elephant. Then they found a whole elephant snare roll and removed it. So poachers were active in the area. They were killing elephants, but before they could kill the next set of elephants, we had removed this elephant snare roll, potentially saving lives of elephants. And then antelope snares were removed. All of this showed that PAWS is promising in terms of being able to predict where poachers set traps. And so the next step was to do a national test that was in 3 different national parks, Queen Elizabeth and Murchison Falls in Uganda, Sripak Wildlife Sanctuary in Cambodia. In each park, we selected 24 areas. We said these were infrequently patrolled areas. We said that some of them are high-risk areas because we predict more snares would be found. Some of them were low-risk areas, less snares would be found. And so where we indeed predicted high risk, more snares were found. Where we predicted low risk, less snares were found. In Sripak Wildlife Sanctuary, compared to number of snares found in 2018, the number of snares in 2019 after pause was deployed jumped fivefold. In 2021, in March alone, 1,000 snares were found and removed because of pause. So all of this is leading to excitement in terms of being able to use pause in the field for these wildlife conservation organizations. They have a program called SMART, which is a collaboration between different wildlife conservation organizations. The SMART is a database that collects all the past poaching incidents. Pause works with SMART because it can now predict where snares will be found in the future. And so this system is now made available to 1,000 national parks around the globe. And we are excited by the possibility that this system may assist rangers in the difficult work they do in trying to predict where poachers may attack. So I'm going to now just quickly wrap up. There's a lot of work that can be done. We've worked with drones, with infrared imagery. We've tried to detect rhinos. One interesting point is it's very difficult to find rhinos. Our ecology friends have told us you should find not rhinos themselves, but rhino middens. These are rhino poop. If we can find rhino poop, then we can find rhinos. So the best of AI and drone technology is now searching for rhino poop in national parks to help protect rhinos. My student, Lily Xu, has been going around to different parks and discussing pause with them, and this partnership with national organizations, with these wildlife conservation organizations, is crucial. So I'll end here by pointing out some lessons we have learned. First, achieving social impact and AI innovation go hand in hand. We have to look at the whole pipeline. The end-to-end perspective in AI for social impact is important. We are supposed to be swimming in this world of big data, but in AI for social impact, lack of data is often a norm, because as I showed you in the HIV prevention case, the social network was not known in advance. So we have to figure out how to deal with the fact that we don't have enough data. Partnerships with nonprofits, governments, and local communities becomes crucial. It's important to integrate these AI innovations in the normal workflow of the NGO. We don't want to be engaged in helicopter science where we go into a community, take their data, publish a paper, and run away. We want to be engaged with them in the long term to deliver AI benefits. And it's important to step out of the lab and into the field for AI for social impact. If you wanted to, for those of you who might want to just get introduced to AI and so forth and what's happening, I will highly recommend Harvard's CS50 course. There's free courseware available on the web. So please, if you're interested, this might be an introductory step. And if you just wanted to do something in this sphere, I recommend maybe donating to these homeless youth organizations or wildlife conservation organizations, or giving employees opportunities to engage in AI for social good. So I know I've come to the end of my time, so thank you very much. If you wanted to get in touch with me, those are my coordinates. Thank you again for listening to me on a Saturday, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tambe. That was a very insightful talk. I think you have successfully convinced us that there is a lot more that can be done with AI, and we are very impressed by your talk. And there are a few questions that are lined up. I will try to highlight some of these. Well, before we do that, I wanted to ask you a question of my own. If you may, how do you deal with lack of data kind of a situation? What strategies do you use in those scenarios when enough data is not there?
So lack of data is often a problem we face in this work, because we are working in communities that have low data, low resources, low compute, and so forth. And often the PhD is actually in figuring out how to deal with low data. In the case of the HIV prevention, we use sampling strategies. And so the key novelty was in figuring out what's the right sampling strategy in a graph. But there's no one-size-fits-all solution to lack of data. We've used different approaches to deal with how to collect data or how to compensate for the lack of data. But I just wanted to be aware, for the audience to be aware that it's not the case that everywhere we have tons and tons of data available to do AI work. We often have to face with this lack of data. And sometimes I'll have students who will come and say, I want to do this work. There is no data, so I cannot do it. That's not a satisfactory solution. You have to, that's the real world, that we have no data and we have to somehow figure out what to do in this case.
Wonderful. Thank you. There is a question in Q&A by Viti Bindra. Says, Professor Tambe, do you face any challenges pertaining to tax implementations, etc., while working on such a noble cause in India as a US citizen?
Tax implementations, not sure I understood. Do you mean, I'm not sure if you mean for me personally?
Perhaps he is referring to tax implications. I think there may be a typo there.
Okay. Not really. I mean, I guess I'm not an employee of any organization in India. I'm working here. I guess it's mainly, I mean, there are people who work in India who are deploying the software and so forth. So I'm not, I haven't faced any so far.
All right. There is another question by Rakesh Jha. He says, how is the training or RMAB models different from that of other RL models? Also, do you use deep learning in your work on AI for social good?
Yes, that's an excellent question. The restless bandit model is very much like a RL model. There's one difference, however, because the model has to work right away. We cannot do online training with these mothers. We have to be able to give them immediate benefit. What this means is, rather than doing online training of these models, we have to rely on past data to do offline learning of the behaviors of these mothers. And so essentially it's an RL approach, but we have done offline learning from past data, and then we are using these models to assist in future behaviors. And indeed, the work that I've discussed with decision-focused learning, this is all deep learning coming to play, but it is being used in this offline manner in this restless bandits.
Okay, great, thank you. Shail Kumar asks, what is the cost to the NGOs of computing and algorithms to run these AI solutions?
Fantastic question. We know that these organizations have limited budgets. So they may have, like, for example, Arman, which the organization I discussed, has only an hour of cloud compute time per week. And so the main issue for us becomes, how do you do frugal computation? And so we face this challenge again and again. So again, this is a research question for us, is exactly how do you construct models so that they don't require a lot of computation. And AI for social impact, as I mentioned, is a topic where we have low data, low resources, and low compute. And we have to be able to handle these constraints. And the research often goes into these challenges. Fantastic question.
Now, the next question is also by Rakesh Jha. He says, what factors drive the selection of socially beneficial projects that you decide to invest your efforts in? For example, is it driven by demand or driven by what you can really readily execute?
This, again, great question. In the AI for social good community, slowly we have now arrived at a set of questions we ask at the beginning of any of these projects. We want to know if the problem is important, if AI can make a difference, if can we somehow gather data, even if by sampling and so forth, in order to execute an AI solution. If we executed an AI solution, would the organization allow us to evaluate it? And if we evaluate it, would the organization be able to scale the solution? These are, and then, is this work going to be ethically important or, ethically addressed? And so There may be other questions as well, but these are some of the questions that we ask right at the beginning. And in some cases, you know, it turns out, for example, I was in another country, maybe not in India, and the minister was very happy. Yes, we should use AI for wildlife conservation, all of that. But when we started talking to the rangers, they were telling us, okay, we just need better shoes. We don't need any fancy technology. And so in those cases, AI is not a solution. So we have to be careful as to where AI can be used and where not. And as the questions I mentioned at the start of this conversation, in order to understand where AI can social good be applied.
Okay, great. The next question is from Sukhwinder Lamba. He says, excellent presentation, Professor Tambe. My question is more on funding for startups pursuing social causes like public health and public safety. What would be your recommendation on sources of funds beyond government grants for these innovators? Thank you.
That's a excellent question. I don't think I have I know for university researchers, because I have been one, where to get this kind of funding, but for startups, I'm not entirely sure where, where funding can be obtained. I'm assuming that there are grants available from philanthropic organizations. For example, by Google has a philanthropic arm, google.org, for example. I'm sure that there are organizations like this that may be able to assist, but I don't have a lot of ideas there for the startup world.
No.
For doing this type of work, but it's certainly important, and I would myself love to know.
Thank you. Next question is from Jayati Sharma. She says, hi, Dr. Tambe, wonderful talk and impressive work. I imagine there must be many possible partnerships that could benefit from this work. How do you choose which collaborators to craft and pursue, and how do you set research priorities?
So I highlighted some of the questions that we asked at the beginning of our conversation in terms of AI for social impact. Indeed, there are many organizations which approach us. Sometimes we approach them, and it's a conversation to try to figure out where we can actually make an impact. There are organizations where sometimes I will meet the founder. The founder is extremely passionate about the cause that they have. Maybe it's for children in India, what have you. But unfortunately, there's just no data available. So there's nothing we can, in some cases, the data non-availability is to such a degree that even any of the strategies we can think of to collect the data becomes rather difficult. So it's choosing the right partner. Certainly, it depends also on my own interests. So for example, I have not been involved as much in, let's say, agriculture. It's just not some background that I have. I know some other people have been involved with the AI for agriculture, for example. So some of it is personal interest. Perhaps I come from an urban background, so more of issues that touch upon urban settings appeal to me more. But after that, it's the questions I ask to try and figure out where partnership is feasible, where it may have an impact, where AI will be accepted as a solution, where there'll be an ethical deployment, and so forth.
Thank you, Professor Tambe. There's one question by an anonymous attendee. He says, or she says, what large social problems are yet to be tackled by AI, especially in the healthcare sector?
I would say that on the whole, on a global scale, if you look at global health, for example, Harvard has this Global Health Institute, and we just had an annual symposium at this institute. There's such large populations on the planet that have simply not benefited from AI. I mean, tuberculosis, for example, kills 1.3 million people around the world. Unfortunately, tuberculosis is a disease that is more common in low and middle income countries, and it just has not received the type of priority that other diseases have. And so there are many such worldwide diseases. Malnutrition is another problem that impacts people from low and middle income countries in larger numbers. not enough work in this area. So there's so many important global health challenges around the world where AI could make an impact, and very little has been done. And people in health, in global health, would really appreciate if AI researchers could work with them. And so I would, if someone is interested, I would say, that's going to be that's a huge area to be able to participate in.
Good, thank you. Pradeep Haldar says, these algorithms in the wrong hands could also cause havoc. How do you deal with this?
That's an excellent question. I mean, we are trying to build these algorithms more for social good, but of course, in the completely wrong hands. But it's like developing technology, right? I mean, it's really the technology is being developed to help people. So we can put in some safeguards when we give this technology out. We can put legal frameworks around them, for example, that they should be used for the purposes that we have. But beyond that, it's not so much in the technology, it would be much more in the framework surrounding the technology, the legal frameworks and so forth that can be put around them to try to prevent them falling in the wrong hands. It's an excellent question, but like I said, I mean, we can't stop working on AI for social good because the benefit from being able to develop this seems large. And to a certain, I mean, we can get into a much bigger discussion about the kinds of technology that we are developing and so forth. But I don't think we can put enough safeguards in the technology itself in order to prevent its wrong use. It would be much more the surrounding frameworks.
Thank you. Vikash Kodati says, how do you ensure the AI systems you develop are not perpetuating biases or causing unintended harm, especially when working with vulnerable populations? I think he's talking about the responsible AI aspect of things.
Yes. No, I entirely agree, Vikash. This is a very important problem. Deep partnership is one of the things, beginning to end, just being working in close partnership in the organizations that we're working with the homeless shelters, with Arman, and not only working with them, but then showing them the solutions. So in our case, continuously testing whether the resources, in this case, service calls, are going out in an equitable fashion to all sections of society. So those are things that we continuously test for. In actuality, of course, there's an issue of making sure the research has to advance to make sure that we don't perpetuate biases. And to that end, we have been continuing to push these algorithms so that we have enforced them to ensure that they don't continue, they don't have biases. But while that research continues, practically, we have been continuously checking to make sure that we don't have biases that are shown in algorithm. But thank you for that question.
The next question is from Venkateshwara Sanivaprapu. He says, I think 9/11-like events have been thwarted in the world, especially in the US. Could be because of efforts like Armor. Could a pandemic-like event be prevented for hundreds or even thousands of years with AI, assuming all relevant data is available?
That's a very very interesting and big question. I think I mean, certainly, I think this is a more optimistic view, perhaps, of what might be feasible. But certainly, we want to be able to actually use AI for detecting pandemics, for predicting where pandemics may arise, and try and thwart them before they become a more global problem. And so, certainly, something like these. I mean, there are centers that try and think about using AI for pandemic prevention or detection or prediction. We're not there yet. There's a lot of work that needs to happen, but it's a very, very optimistic point that you're painting, and I hope we get there.
Thank you. The next question is from Rakesh Jha. He says, lack of data seems to be an industry-wide problem. There is a trend to generate data synthetically. Is that feasible? In your work?
Some of it might be, and it's something that that we should explore. But in the end, of course, we want to be able to really touch with it, work with real data, and so yeah, it's an interesting thought. We haven't really pursued it, but ultimately, really, we have to compensate for the lack of data. Yeah.
The next question is also on something synthetic. Rahul Trivedi says, Professor Tambe, have you considered using synthetic voice for placing outgoing calls? Apparently, technology has become quite matured and could augment capacity.
So, Rahul, thank you for that question. Remember that just for the audience to remember that there's two kinds of calls we are placing, and perhaps Rahul is referring to the second one. The first one is the automated health message. So that's like a message that's automated. I mean, it's a recorded message that's going out. And then there are these service calls that are made live from the call center. We have certainly considered using automated synthetic voices or, maybe a large language model to replace the call center workers. However, there are several issues here. One, these are mothers in very difficult circumstances. When they engage with the call center operators, they may reveal to the call center operator difficulties they are facing, like domestic abuse, like they may be bleeding and so on and so forth. They may be in a very emergency situation. So there's a medical issue here that needs to be addressed. And as a result, the ethical thing to do has been to say, let's not get an AI system involved in the loop here, because the situation could be dire for the mother who's calling. And also, this is maybe the only human contact this woman may have outside of her family. And so all of this has led us to not go with synthetic voices or LLMs or something like that for the service call portion, where there's a live human being supposed to be calling these mothers.
Thank you. Anil Singh says, Professor Milind, would love to get your thoughts on AI education in India. Are you able to find AI talent to work on these projects?
Oh yeah, there is tons of AI talent. I mean, I'm involved with Google Research India. It's I'm trying to remember how many people there are, but with pre-docs and so on and so forth, maybe there's 150 people doing AI work. The top researchers there are absolutely phenomenal. So there's a lot of AI talent. No, I'm very happy to say.
There is a comment by an anonymous attendee. Thank you for these wonderful ideas and impactful research. These examples clearly show how AI can optimize resources for nonprofits, public bodies, and create operational planning. Still, undersourced nonprofits need more operational support beyond optimization and resource planning. How can AI bridge this gap further? This is actually by Pranshu Joshi. He mentioned
So
his name.
good. Yeah, great comment. Yeah, certainly beyond the kind of resource planning work that we've done, we would be very happy to see what else can be done. Clearly, they face many challenges. I would be thrilled to answer, to know myself what are the challenges we can address for them. Our work, just because of the expertise we have, has been focused more on the type of problems of limited resources. That's just because that's the world we've come in terms of the kind of research expertise we have. But yeah, if there are other problems that are of interest, we certainly would love to take a look at those.
Next question is from Deepak Kamath. I'm sorry, we are having you work so hard on these questions, Professor
No,
Tambe.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that there are all these questions. No, thank you.
Next one is from Deepak Kamath. He says, Professor Tambe, you mentioned the call centers to help mothers, TB patients, etc. Can people outside India volunteer to support these call centers with their time?
Wow, that's such an interesting idea. I personally do not know how, whether these organizations have thought of this but certainly a very interesting idea, and perhaps something more can be done with this idea, so that it's some kind of a coalition of people who can assist these organizations. I haven't seen or thought about this myself, and haven't talked to these organizations, but it's a phenomenal idea.
Right. Thank you. The next question is by Sid Jan. He says, how can the NGOs working in remote rural areas with no internet accessibility and cellular network are able to leverage the setup?
So the work that I can think of here is work we might be doing with ASHA workers in India, for example, who are these health workers who go out in remote villages. In such cases, the work that we are focused on is more on giving them directions, if you will, when they have connectivity, and then they go offline and they don't need that kind of connectivity. For example, certainly with the rangers, for example, I showed you with the wildlife conservation, there is no connectivity in the field, but there's connectivity when they are gathered together in the center, in the planning hub, in the ranger station. And so that's the way that at least we have approached this in terms of, but for NGOs who are really, really remote, that's going to be an interesting challenge in terms of how to allow them to leverage AI. It's an important challenge.
Thank you. Another question by an anonymous attendee, Professor Tambe. Thank you for an amazing talk. Can you please share your insights on LLM models for inference generation? What are the challenges involved in this process?
So I'm assuming this is referring to the work that I shared with the use of LLMs for allowing us to more, make these models like the restless bandit models more generally available. I think, at this point, the work is somewhat early stages, and what we find is that when the commands that we've given them are somewhat reasonably straightforward, that the whole system really works. But when these commands become very ambiguous, like give more preference to technologically challenged mothers, for example, then it becomes harder for the LLM to really interpret what is going on, and then we would need a human in the loop to compensate for them not being able to infer what we mean from the kinds of commands that we've given. So what we have done in our work with LLMs is that the LLM itself is not doing any planning. The LLM is only interpreting human commands and then setting the priorities for the planner, which is the restless bandit model. So we've kept the two separate, the LLM and the planner, and hooked them together. And that is the way in which we have allowed LLM to deal with inference. So the LLM itself is not doing planning or is not doing complicated things about resource allocation. The LLM is only exploiting an external tool. So it's LLM plus X rather than LLM by itself in our work.
Thank you. Next question is by Gaurav Srivastav. How can we make this approach scalable? Can the AI solution be in the form of a semi-customizable software that is available to whoever wants to use it?
That's exactly right. That is exactly the direction, Gaurav, that we are hoping to go in with the LLMs and so forth. The work is in early stages, but indeed we want to bring with the use of LLMs and others so that we don't have to have a new nonprofit, let's say, who wants to work on tuberculosis in Ghana or something like that, that then, they have to engage with an AI researcher and they have to build this model from scratch and all of that, that we could potentially have these sort of scalable, reconfigurable, instructable foundation models as where they're pre-trained, And that's the direction in which we are going indeed.
Thank you. Next question by an anonymous attendee. What is the scope of industry sponsorship? For example, US tech companies of these projects as compared to grant funding?
This is a great question. I have myself tried to encourage this kind of funding. So, for example, at Google, I ran, obviously in collaboration with lots of other people, we ran these matchmaking workshops. So essentially, in these workshops, nonprofits would apply, professors would apply, and then we did speed dating. Each nonprofit met with 3 professors, each professor met with 3 nonprofits, and they would write a joint proposal. And we would fund from Google the promising proposals as seed funding. And then after a year, for the promising, the teams that had made promising progress, we would fund them even more. And so there's now, there is a great opportunity to get funding from these tech companies. I'm sure Microsoft has a similar program and so on and so forth, and others do too. So there is actually good opportunity to get money from these tech companies. I would say that, in fact, for some of these projects, like homeless people in LA or wildlife conservation and so on, it is really not easy to get grant funding, because grant funding is more focused on maybe some pure science funding comes in, but applications to these kinds of social causes, finding computer science funding is not easy from the government. So indeed, getting funding from these private organizations, these tech companies, is actually quite important.
Right. Thank you. Next question is by Vikash Kodati. In your view, what are the most promising and underexplored areas where AI can be applied for social good in the next few years? What excites you about the potential in this field? I think you have briefly touched upon this before. But
the latter part, what excites me about the potential in the field, honestly, is more the students. When I teach my class at Harvard, I see so many students interested in AI for social good. When I go and talk about it elsewhere, I find students deeply interested in this topic. So that's what makes me very optimistic about being able, about the future of this area, that this is going to be an important area. I wanted to just briefly say that when I learned AI, this was in the late 1980s, all we had were like a bunch of papers, and my other students, other colleague students in the program would sort of tell me that AI is basically BS. There's nothing there. You should learn real computer science, because it had textbooks and it had real math, and AI had nothing. But we've made a lot of progress since the late 1980s. Now, the real textbooks, obviously, AI is impacting the whole planet. AI for social good is in a similar boat to where AI was in the late 1980s. Today, there's not a real textbook. It's hard to know what exactly to teach students to do AI for social good. What we have today is, again, read a bunch of papers. But I'm hopeful that, in a few years, we will get to a point where textbooks will emerge. It's not adequate to teach students just do, regular AI and then say, oh, now you can do AI for social good. It doesn't work like that. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to educate the next generation, maybe not this generation, but the next generation, in real, making them more well-trained in AI for social good and have real impact. So anyway, I'm very optimistic about how AI for social good will progress.
Thank you, Professor Tambe. I think we have a lot more questions. We can continue as long as you want, but we'll probably take a few more before we wrap up.
Yeah.
We appreciate your staying back for this.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for your interest, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Could we do a few more questions, Professor?
Sure.
This one is by Sid Jan. He says, is there an effort towards improving the efficiency of government programs for welfare distributions so that the right people receive and benefit from them?
Certainly people are trying, for example, housing allocation. So it's been much more of a piecemeal effort, if you will. But for example, in Los Angeles Housing Authority, basically, who should get houses, which homeless people should get which houses. That has been a topic of research. There are other such government programs where people have been trying to assist local government agencies for ensuring that there's more efficient distribution. But maybe what you're hinting at is a much more comprehensive approach, much more of an embrace of the government. We are talking here in Massachusetts to our Massachusetts Department of Public Health, trying to see how we can assist them. We are also talking to the city of Boston to see how we can assist them. But all of this is so far piecemeal. If there were, my dream, if there were a department of AI for social good, that would be like a really good thing to have. But there's no, there's a defense department, but we don't have the Department of AI for social good or something like that. But a comprehensive approach for using AI for bringing efficiency to welfare, programs and so forth would be highly welcome.
Thank you. Asrita Nalapaneni says, are you working on any agricultural or agriculture-related projects currently? How do you think AI can be better leveraged in this space, in addition to providing crop advisory inputs like weather forecasts, pesticide selection, etc.?
It's a great area to be involved in. I have not been involved in agriculture. It's just AI can be used. It is a very important area. It's just not my background. I guess I have not gone in that direction. And the points you mentioned with respect to agriculture clearly are important. There are other researchers who have been looking at AI for agriculture, and I'll be, later on happy to point out those researchers to you who have been active in that area.
Thank you. A question by Ajay Ray. He says, Professor Tambe, excellent work and presentation. Can you please share your inputs for those who are new to AI and ML and are interested in learning, contributing to this field? You mentioned CS50. Is there anything else you would like to add, Professor Tambe?
For those who want to learn more, there are other resources available. I can sort of point those out to you from Harvard and others. But yeah, we've already covered some of these, so maybe we take on the next question.
Shiva Venkataraman says, Professor Tambe, wonderful presentation. Thank you. Have you thought of applying AI to prevent scams, cyber threats? And if so, can you share some thoughts on this? Lots of people around the world have lost money to scams.
That's definitely an application area of game theory. Certainly AI-based audits, these game theory-based audits has been a topic of interesting work. I have personally not done work in this area, but in a sense, it's the same idea. You have limited resources to do some checking, and who do you check? And there's also this very interesting work on how can you signal to scammers or whoever that checking is going on, maybe when there is no checking going on, again, using these ideas of game theory. So a lot of possibilities there. I haven't myself done that work, but there are others who have been pushing uses of game theory in that direction.
Great, thank you. I think we'll take one last question before we wrap up. Let me take this one by Krishnaram Kentapari. I think it's not just our alumni who are on this call. There are also family members. And this one says, this is a question from my 8th grade son, Krishnaram says. He says, along the lines of your project to identify the right mothers to send advice to, is it possible to send information to individuals or organizations about waste disposal, for example, and recycling? For instance, could it be possible to create an AI model to identify restaurants without too much money, that may not have too much money, that might buy paper plates instead of reusable plates and give them advice on more sustainable options, etc.?
Very interesting. Certainly there are projects, one done by my former PhD student in Pittsburgh, for example, which is more on matching food banks to restaurants, for example, so that they don't waste food and deliver food to food banks. And so those kinds of things are certainly there. this is an interesting idea to be able to figure out, to identify, to predict where particular restaurants may benefit from particular kinds of advice. Interesting thing. As I said, towards food security, a lot of people have been working towards matchmaking of where there is excess food and which food banks can it be delivered to in an efficient manner.
I think there are still 4 more questions, but we have covered a lot of ground today. We really want to wrap up now, and thank you, Professor Tambe, for taking the time from your busy schedule to be with us. I think this was a very insightful talk, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from this talk. We are going to post the recording of this session on the PanIIT USA website. So please refer to those. Those who are not able to attend today can use that recording there. We really appreciate you, Professor Tambe. Thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for joining today's session. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you again. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.